Okay, guys, thank you very much for making it here today to our first panel about sales progression for Kerfuffle. I am joined by the wonderful, depends where you're looking, I'm joined by the wonderful David Mintz.
Hello.
Operational in his office, helping the public as a keyword, sell property into move, so he's the good guy. I'm representing the suppliers. And then what we've got is we've got a selection, we've got an elite cadre of people here. So the way I'm looking at it, we've got Richard Megson from Mansell. Just give us a wave, Richard.
Morning.
We were talking about before the fantastically coiffured and dressed Babek from OneDome. Please, Babek, give us a shout out. Alex looking good with the cliff there. Say hello, Alex, Mr. Willis. From
Hi, guys.
We've got Bryan from Bryan, good Liverpool fan there from Gazeal. Do you want to give us a shout out? That's some product holding that hair up there, Bryan. Very impressive.
A lot of products as well.
We've got John Horton from Mio. Hello, John. He's fighting broadband issues, but we've got him for the moment. And then we've got Tony from AVRillo. And Tony, you will notice you're the only one that got the Pele single name thing going on there. So that's what happens when your personal name is as big as your own brand. So welcome, Tony, as well from the fantastic AVRillo. Thank you all, guys. I am not for once going to waffle too much because I want to get straight into it. We're going to ask a few generic questions, and we've got individual questions as well. And as I said, we've taken a few questions hopefully from the floor as well over the week, and we'll, if we've got time at the end, we'll portray those back to you. One of the things we do at Kerfuffle is we try and do white papers on it, and the reason we're here today is this month for us is Sales Progression Month. You know, that's how exciting we are. We thought we'd go for the zinger straight away. And we did a survey out to a few hundred agents, and I think it was probably not the most surprising thing. It's probably the No Shit Sherlock Award. 100% of agents thought the conveyancing process took too long. I think that's obviously speaks for itself. It talks that there is a little bit of antipathy, if we're honest, between the two very close industries there. But I wanted to kick off really with getting into a bit of detail with it and talking about what the main pain points are in traditional sales progression. And if it's okay, and I'll just do this because it's simple for me to highlight in here, because you're at the top, at least on my screen, Richard. Do you want to kick us off with that? What do you think what are the pain points?
Well, I think with sales progression, there's a lot of pain. Just coming back to your white paper, lots of agents don't do sales progression well. So some of the bigger corporates will have, they'll either outsource or probably more likely have a dedicated resource. But just going to some sort of detail, I mean, you know, around the table here or on the screen, there's different businesses with different types of approach to this, but I think we'd all agree, and you've just said it, that the conveyancing process takes too long and it's too painful. So we as a business would welcome any initiative, be it a service-led business like ours or technology like some of the other guys around the table. But particularly in terms of pain points, I guess traditionally there is a lack of collaboration between agents and solicitors. Certainly some of the webinars I've been on and the solicitors we work with, there is a desire to make that relationship more productive. I think in terms of sales progression, sometimes a lack of knowledge. My co-director was a solicitor, a conveyancer, and the bane of his life was sales progressors phoning up, asking for an update, but without any real knowledge of what's being done. So I think progression is not just about progressing a case. I think it's about knowledge and actually adding and helping clients. It is, after all, a heavy lifting exercise, and lots of agents are not keen on it. I think chains are clearly an issue. I think agents, or some agents, don't do sales progression well because either they don't do it or they don't prioritize as a role in their business. And I think in general, traditionally, there's a lack of visibility of information.
Okay, so that specialisation point you would highlight is really just one of the areas that, of course, like in any, whether it's prospecting or sales progression, if you put somebody on the job, naturally you would expect them to get better and specialise at it.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
I don't think you can understate actually the issue there of communication between agents and solicitors, or sales progressors and solicitors. There used to be sort of a trial by fire initiation ceremony that they used to have at the company that I started at, and they would make you call 5 of the grumpiest solicitors in the world to chase a sale. And if you could, and then they're not paid to speak to you. Simply, they didn't see it as part of their job. It wasn't part of the process, and all this sort of touchy-feely customer service is that we have that focus nowadays. That wasn't there for solicitors back in the day, and so agents got used to knowing that on the whole, solicitors were going to stonewall them, not want to take their calls, or not really want to get involved with them. So it's really interesting. I think that's changing, but it's still there in a lot of traditional firms.
If you don't mind me, Simon,
Yeah.
I kind of agree with David and Richard. Just taking it one step above, I think the main problem is coordination. It's a transaction where you have 6 different people involved, obviously a buyer and a seller, 2 lawyers, mortgage broker and agent. And at the moment, there isn't actually anything that connects them. So this coordination is quite a big problem, where everybody is, what is outstanding, what needs to be done, what is, and also consumer education as well. Like, I mean, most of the buyers and sellers are not seasoned buyers and sellers. If you look at the stats in UK, consumer buys a property every 8-9 years. Now there's a discussion, actually, it's longer than that now. It's more like 15-18 years. So it's still quite a long time. So people don't really know what they need to do. They have a rough idea of overall process, that they need a mortgage broker, an agent, and the conveyancer, but actually what they need to do in the step-by-step process, a lot of time consumers don't know that. So they go with the flow as they've been told to do things. And I think one of the major problems here is a coordination problem. There's no single platform where everything is visible to everybody. As Richard mentioned, obviously transparency and visibility is super important, but also being able to kind of pass the flow from one person to another in a simple way and educate consumer on what they really need to do in the process.
Simon, I would second what everyone's saying, really, but from my perspective, I think sales progression is not just really tedious for estate agents, but it's for all of the parties that are involved throughout the whole process. But particularly the conveyancer, and I'll come back to that in a moment, because I think conveyancers do get a bit of a bad rap for why transactions take a long time, but it's not entirely all of their fault, far from it.
Sorry, Don, do you think it's unfair per se? Do you think they are genuinely and generally treated unfairly?
Yeah, I do in part, but I think it's endemic of the traditional process and system that we've currently got. Because the first reason why it's so tedious is that the whole process has never been joined up. You know, it's a complete merry-go-round of telephone calls and emails up and down the chain between agents, lawyers, surveyors, mortgage brokers, and they're all trying to sort of piece together the jigsaw that actually makes up the complete home move. And coming back to Babek's point, you know, at the same time, the agent's also trying to wrestle with and communicate effectively with the vendors and buyers. And let's not lose sight, you know, a good agent is not just there to sell a home, but they're there to support and guide their customer through to the day that they pick up the keys. And coming back to Richard's point, I agree. The other big problem here is that different agents place a different level of importance on sales progression. Many of them we talk to, they still operate with paper-based systems, which I think with the more remote working has really highlighted some of the vulnerabilities of using paper. And actually, Simon, your question refers to the word traditional, and I think therein lies part of the problem. The traditional process is outdated. There's lots of duplication and inefficiency, which is why if you're a lawyer, and let's say you've got a 50 property caseload, on average, you're fielding somewhere in the region of 6 calls a week per case from all of the various people. And guess what? They're all asking the same question, just asking for an update. And that probably consumes about 15 hours of the conveyancer's time trying to field those phone calls rather than actually get on and do the conveyance. So I think with tradition, there comes a certain mindset that needs breaking. You know, we've always done it this way. And I think the market, and across agents in particular, because they're at the coalface of that client relationship, I think there needs to be more willingness to collaborate and change. You know, don't go looking for quick fixes. You know, look for longer term solutions is my advice.
As an ex-estate agent for 30 years on here, I've got a different take on this. I agree with everything you've all said, but actually there's one fundamental problem that I believe is the quickest fix. Sales progression, first of all, from an estate agent's point of view, is not sales progression, it's sales chasing. You know, agents don't tend to progress a transaction forward. They tend to stop it from moving forward.
Very true.
by trying to find out what's going on. That is for two reasons. First of all, sales progression should start when the property lists, not when it sells. And secondly, and this is probably, I think, the biggest issue. Now, Babek's point about consumer education is absolutely spot on, but there should be an industry education on sales progression with the negotiators, because let's face it, as someone, I ran a couple of very large agencies, and I know firsthand the pain on this. And that is that often the lister, the manager, the senior person lists the property, a senior negotiator negs the sale. And then if you don't have a full-time sales progression team, you're then leaving the progression of a transaction, i.e. your cash flow, to the people that know the least and probably have not owned a property for a long time to progress it. And all fairness to them, as an industry trainer as well, we see this everywhere. These poor people are trying to do their best with all the right intentions to provide customer service, but they become an unnecessary middleman in the process that slows it as well, because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And that's one of the biggest problems, I think.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Anyone else got anything to finish off on this point? Yeah, okay, Tony.
Yes, I agree with everything the guys are saying. I think John's going to say something about. So my background is I'm a solicitor, but I was an estate agent before I was a solicitor, so I'm very much still an estate agent. So I've seen it from both sides, and I would say that there's blame both sides, and no one really works as a team properly unless you've got a great relationship with your recommending agent. And the problem it's lack of teamwork. And I would say, if I was to apportion blame, I would say it's more the lawyers, to be honest with you, because agents want to progress the case. Fair enough. I mean, we can't lose sight of the fact that really we're all here to actually get a client moved. That's what we're all here for. So the agent and the lawyer is really trying to move the client to completion, and that's what we all get paid for. So if you're looking at that, who's got real control of that? Well, reality is agents can do so much. They can chase, as Brian said, but really the lawyers have got control of that. And I think it is, you know, we're talking about traditional lawyers, and I think it is getting that mindset to say, actually, the profession should change to not be a push profession. They should be pulling the transaction to completion and not being pushed to get the transaction to completion. I think that's a real problem, really. I say, but there are some amazing lawyers out there, and they all mean really, really well. And, you know, the point was made that we've got an archaic process. We have got an archaic process. That's not going to change, despite all the, you know, everyone talking about changes, the government, it's not going to happen anytime soon. So reality is, I think it's the lawyers have got to get that process changed before everyone else. But it is teamwork, because they're not going to do it. Everyone's short of resources at the moment, so no one's going to do it individually. But it's a matter of getting that process going to get the lawyers to be much more proactive and work as a better team with the agents.
That makes perfect sense. Thanks, Tony. Alex, we did have a question in the week. I just wanted to ask you specifically, in what ways and other ways are GOTO set up to support the sales progression process?
Yeah, I mean, we run a concierge service for home movers. So our solution consists of 7 property services in total, which results in an end-to-end property solution on one platform. So just hearing what some of the guys were saying, some excellent points just in that first question. We can help almost, if we can handhold someone through that journey. So we're picking someone up at the outset and we're able to talk to them about their mortgage and fit their brokers, for example. The next part, we then can give them a conveyancing quote and manage that journey. If we have more control of that process, then it means that we are controlling more of it on their behalf. So our system, people can access it to see updates, all encompassing in one place. So, you know, from that point of view, it's really important that we can manage that full journey for them, up to the removals, up to the surveys. So by having access to it, it makes the process far more efficient. Obviously, the agents can earn more from the process as well, but the main thing is there's a system that knits it all together and allows people to have complete visibility of that process, which therefore will result in hopefully a quicker and more efficient process as well.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, guys, thank you for rounding up on that first question. The second question we had for everyone is, how can digital platforms help speed up the process? I know many of you obviously are from that world, so do you want to kick off? Anyone wants to? You want to jump straight in? There he is. He's riding on the back of his first one. Go on then. Hog the air with Alex.
I think you know, what we see is it's so important to get the start of a process right. You know, that onboarding of a case is incredibly important. Making sure the information's correct, making sure the appropriate documents are filled out, and meaning the case can get off to a good start. And, you know, I know, you know, Bryan will talk about the searches and making sure that bit gets instructed at the early stage to mean that that's going to result in a quicker transaction. But, you know, from our point of view, we in May 2018 we launched a digital starter pack. It's upon an agent instructing a case, automatically there's an email that gets sent out to them, and they can then log into a platform to complete a digital starter pack, upload documents, upload ID, and we are then integrated with our solicitor firms to, when that's submitted, that form submitted, it immediately goes off to them to mean that they can get things up and running as well. And just in that case with that agent that we launched with, they were used to reach an exchange of contracts on average in 115 days. In a few months, we were able to take a good cross-section of cases that we've done and see that we've got down to 76 days, so just under 11 weeks, just from that initial onboarding. Because from a homeowner's point of view, some of that documentations, and certainly if they're dealing with a more traditional firm, can be quite mundane and quite arduous. You know, there's a lot of information, often having to print it off and return it, whereas if you can, you know, use technology to help people, then we find that significantly supports that journey from that point onwards.
How much further do you think that's the best you can get it down to, 76 days, or do you think there's still room in terms of improvement there? No,
I mean, you know, like everyone else on this panel, we're always looking at ways that we can positively affect the transaction times. We've just launched a product, Fast Track Conveyancing, which the of it, you know, and part of it is getting searches ordered at the outset as soon as the vendor instructs. You know, the hope is there that we can get that transaction time to exchange down to 28 days. So there's definitely a lot more that can come off that timescale. That was just one thing that we affected a couple of years ago that had a really positive impact. No, I mean, it's a really marked improvement. John, obviously yours is all about the digital platform. Do you want to give us a bit of a sort of overview of what your thoughts are there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, digital platforms, loading up the front end of the transaction with more information right at the start of the process, rather than weeks into, you know, a sale that's been tied up, is obviously a kind of immediate area of focus. And obviously Property Mark have launched their protocol forms, and they've started to report some notable improvements in transaction times. The thing for me, I think, is coming back to this kind of joining up of information, because, you know, digital platforms, yes, we've clearly seen they support remote working, and perhaps that's going to be the new normal for a sales progressor in branch. And obviously they address some of the risks associated with paper-based systems, and it improves process, but it still creates transparency, but it's kind of isolated and within that branch. You know, a digital system can start scheduling reminders, and that kicks off the Mexican wave of phone calls and emails and chases that we saw earlier. But at the end of the day, you're still vulnerable because you've got lots of unconnected digital silos. And that's why we created Mio in the first place. You know, it's secure, it's cloud-based system for agents to connect and sales progress one chain with an app for improved customer communication. So, you know, a move to digital, but providing everything the market's crying out for, which is transparency and efficiency, a limited amount of shared data up and down the chain for obvious reasons. But what we do with MEO is we also have the benefit of importing and using validated data feeds from people like lawyers, surveyors, and mortgage brokers, so that we can kind of automate as much of the process as possible. And that starts to then cut down on unnecessary phone calls to get updates, because you've got that transparency right across the chain. I mean, the average chain is what, 3 properties? You know, until some of these digital solutions started to arrive, you've got 3 versions of the truth. Nothing is joined up and nothing's shared.
And does that involve, I mean, would that necessitate everybody across that chain having to use the same digital platform? And a wider question is, until the industry learns to sort of, there are many digital solutions. We're talking to all of you guys today, and each of you offer bring something slightly different to the table, which hopes to sort of get us to that same end result. But globally, do we not need one sort of uniform system that everybody's able to tap into, so that we're all on the same page? Or in effect, do you end up then running many digital platforms alongside?
I think you'll never get to a situation where you've got one predominant provider that is leading the market with a single solution. I don't think the market would allow that to happen.
So we're not going to see another right move?
No, I don't think so at all. I think the lessons have been learned. But
Okay.
I think we've demonstrated it with some of the partnerships that we've done, in terms of we take data feeds from, say, lawyers and surveyors, and in return for that, we can actually serve up to them things like, you know, a restricted view of the chain, so that they've got some value add in terms for exchanging data with us.
Yeah.
And when we talk to agents, you know, there's lots of agents' properties that already exist in chains inside MEO that they're not necessarily aware of, because obviously they're not currently using MEO. But as soon as they start to actually unlock and register and look at the chains, it then starts to become very revealing, because it then shows them where there is that pinch point and delay, and where the effort and the focus needs to be. Because like I say, some agents are absolutely brilliant and all over their sales progression because it's their lifeblood. Others, as Richard highlighted earlier, place a different level of focus on the importance of sales progression.
Of course,
just very quickly on, I totally agree with John around the fact that obviously visibility and transparency is one of the most important points. One thing we noticed that when we connect an estate agent with their local conveyancing firms, as you know, every estate agent will have some local firms, whether it's a local mortgage broker or local conveyancing firm they work with historically. We've seen that the transaction goes about 30% faster when the consumer uses this kind of a local network that agent build around them, because obviously the coordination goes better, communication goes better. Conveyancers tend to answer to an estate agent's questions or calls, knowing that it's somebody local that they tend to have a strong relationship with. So one of the things digital platforms can do or do with in the case of OneDome is actually nurturing that local relationship, how to connect that agent with the local law firm, and how to kind of empower these local networks and bring them online. So that's one of the things. The second thing, again, I'm bringing this topic around educating consumers. So that is probably one of the big elements that is lacking. Consumers, we all kind of in the industry, we believe, well, it's pretty straightforward. For consumers, it's not straightforward at all. And I remember when I was buying my first property, it was quite a daunting experience, and it was very confusing. So I kept harassing every single person I knew, whoever bought property, asking him questions on what I need to do next, and my agent probably hated me for being an absolute control freak. So that's another element, right? Like how you give constant update, nurturing of the customer. And that's one element, again, digital platforms can do, and that's what we do. We obviously try to connect the whole journey. So we connect portal experience to agent, conveyancers, and mortgage brokers. So the consumer starts from the portal when they actually right at the beginning of the journey all the way to actually receiving the keys. We push consumer to pre-qualify themselves financially early in the stage, because guess what, 30% of all failed transactions happen because buyer actually hasn't been pre-qualified financially. That's a big issue, and that takes a lot of time. So if we can get consumer to start their mortgage journey or MIP right at the beginning when they actually look at the properties, that will definitely save a lot of time, at least stop people wasting their time, particularly for estate agents and everybody else involved. So it takes about 20 minutes to get an MIP from OneDome. And then we connect that consumer to a local mortgage broker that agent like to work with, or any of the mortgage brokers who currently we work with. So that's one element. I think there is a major issue with the data flow. So consumer has to repeat the same things over and over again, right? So you go to an agent, you repeat your same information, you provide them KYC, you do the same with the conveyance, you do the same with the mortgage broker. That makes no sense. It has to be a one uniform form for everybody to fill in, and then that information is passed by the platform. So that's one of the services we provide. And lastly, conveyancing onboarding process, and I'm sorry, there's some conveyancers here, I'm sure your process probably a lot more smoother than the ones we've seen, is an absolute mess, right? It takes several days, if not weeks, to get the client care pack signed. Why not to get it signed digitally on the instruction? So that's one of the services we've added. The second thing, it takes 23 calendar days for searches to be ordered on average based on the industry data. I mean, that makes no sense, right? Like, yes, sometimes conveyancer has to wait to see the mortgage offer coming from the buyer before ordering searches, but these various insurance products can actually save that time and remove that necessity of waiting 23 calendar days before the search is ordered. And lastly is how to get consumers to do things once, right? Like how to make it really easy for them. I mean, the home buying process doesn't need to be this complicated. And I think the one advantage digital platforms will bring to this industry, that in 10 years, we're going to look back and say, how the hell we're buying houses like this? Like now, if you think about like how we get the information now versus how we used to get information, I think everybody here is old enough to remember days when we used to go to library to find information about anything. Now we go to Google and it takes us a few minutes. And that's what's going to happen next 10 years. Like in next 10 years, we're going to look back on how we buy houses now. We'll say, what the hell was that? Like, why it had to take 4 months to get the keys of the property you genuinely like and you shake hand on, and why the home buying process has to take like nearly a year for a buyer. And no surprise, it's one of the most stressful experiences. I mean,
yeah, but Babek, I think there's absolute, the efficiencies of the online model and everything that we've got to hand from an agent's point of view is extremely helpful. It allows us to reach more people. We're able to do things more quickly. I'm sure Tony's got some points to pick up on what Babek's just said, but just going back to the first thing, when agents, you keep in touch with a buyer, and you tend to do that quite frequently. And the reason for that is because of the digital efficiencies that we now have. It works against an agent sometimes. So for instance, in the old days, if you were to sort of sell somebody a house 40 years ago, they would, coming to you in a minute, Richard, if you were to sell somebody a house 40 years ago, they'd go down that street, they'd find the house that they want, they would sort of emotionally commit to that, and that would be it. They'd begin their buying process, and nothing really is going to turn their head. Today, Rightmove, Zoopla, On the Market, OneDome, whatever your portal is, if it is your worst enemy, it's your best friend as an agent. It's selling all the properties that you've got in your shop window. It's also your worst enemy once you've found the buyer, because it's still filling that buyer's inbox full of new properties with other agents every single day. So their ability to get the head turned is really it's there. And in order to counteract that, what we have to do as agents is constantly keep in touch with that buyer, make sure that they're still there, that they're still talking to us, take the temperature of the sale, make sure it's not going cold. So sometimes, yeah, we do overdo it, but this paranoia has been built out of a digital nightmare.
Well, look, John said before, there's no one silver bullet there, but if it's not pushing analogies too much, there's certainly a number of pink bullets in the suppliers here today that can absolutely, you know, help improve on this process for the vast majority of obviously agents out there. We'd encourage, we've already done one individual showcase with Richard and ASAP. We'd look forwards, and I know we've got a few of you already booked in to do over the further months as well, to go into a bit more detail. And please, you know, keep your pages up to date on Kerfuffle. We're already seeing some fantastic reviews flying for all of your individual businesses, and that's the best possible check agents can have in terms of looking at, you know, which ones are working for different people. So I want to thank you all again, Richard, Babek, Alex, Tony, John and Bryan. Really appreciate your time coming out today and talking to us about this vital process. And we'll look forward to staying in touch with you over the coming weeks and months. David, my compadre, thank you very much as well.
Pleasure. See you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.